You know that moment when someone asks you a question and the answer hits you like a freight train? Well, that's exactly what happened during our monthly couples game night. But let me back up a bit, because the true story started 3 months earlier. My wife had been treating me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. Every conversation became a criticism session. Every suggestion I made was met with an eye roll or a sarcastic comment. When I'd suggest watching a movie together, she'd say something like, "Oh great, another one of your boring action flicks." When I'd offer to cook dinner, she'd respond with, "Please don't. I actually want something edible tonight." At first, I thought it was just stress from her new job. Maybe she was going through something. So I tried harder. I picked up extra chores, gave her space when she seemed frustrated, even started working out more thinking maybe she'd appreciate the effort. But nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. The breaking point came during what should have been a fun evening with our closest friends. We do this couples game night thing once a month, rotating between the 4 couples in our group. This time it was at our neighbor's place, and everyone was in a good mood. We'd been playing some random card game, having drinks, just enjoying ourselves. Then someone pulled out this relationship question game. You know the type, designed to spark meaningful conversations between couples. Most of the questions were pretty standard stuff. What's your partner's biggest fear? If you could go anywhere together, where would it be? That kind of thing. But then came the question that changed everything. Would you marry your spouse again, knowing what you know now? The other couples went first. Sweet answers all around. Absolutely, in a heartbeat. Even faster the second time. I'd propose tomorrow if I had to do it again. Everyone was laughing, sharing cute stories about their relationships. Then it was our turn. My wife didn't even hesitate. With this big smile on her face, she announced to the entire room, "Absolutely not. Never again. I mean, seriously, who would sign up for this twice?" The room went dead silent for about 2 seconds, then everyone burst out laughing. They thought she was being hilariously honest in that brutal way couples sometimes joke with each other. Someone said, "Wow, tell us how you really feel." Another person chimed in with, "Points for honesty." But I wasn't laughing. I was watching her face, and she wasn't joking. There was something almost relieved in her expression, like she'd finally gotten to say something she'd been thinking for a while. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my response, waiting for me to laugh it off or fire back with some witty comeback. Instead, I took a sip of my beer, looked directly at her, and said, "You know what? Finally, something we can agree on." The laughter died down pretty quickly after that. The energy in the room shifted. People weren't sure if we were still joking around or if something real was happening. My wife's smile faltered a bit. She probably expected me to laugh along or defend our marriage. Maybe make some comment about how she was just being dramatic. But I didn't. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I set it on the coffee table in front of everyone, right next to the game cards and empty beer bottles. "What's that?" someone asked. I looked around the room at all these people who'd been our friends for years. People who'd been to our wedding, who'd celebrated anniversaries with us, who thought they knew us as a couple. "Well," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady, "since we're being brutally honest tonight, I figured this was as good a time as any." The room was completely quiet now. My wife was staring at the envelope like it might explode. Her face had gone from amused to confused to something approaching panic. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd spent the last 3 months making me feel like an inconvenience. Who'd just announced to our closest friends that marrying me was such a mistake she'd never do it again. "Divorce papers," I said simply. "Already filled out. Just need your signature." The gasps around the room were audible. Someone's drink hit the floor. Another person said, "Oh my God, are you serious right now?" My wife's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words but couldn't. Her face had gone completely white. "You said you'd never marry me again." I continued, my voice still perfectly calm. "Well, good news. After tonight, you won't have to. Let me tell you how I got to that moment, because it didn't happen overnight. 3 months earlier, everything seemed normal on the surface. We had our routines, our weekend plans, our usual couple dynamics. But then something shifted, and not in a good way. It started small. I'd suggest we grab dinner at our usual spot, and she'd respond with, "Ugh, can't you think of anywhere else? We always go there because you have zero imagination." When I try to talk about my day, she'd barely look up from her phone. Became her standard response to pretty much everything I said. Then it escalated. I came home one Friday excited about a promotion opportunity at work. Before I could even finish explaining it, she cut me off with, "Let me guess, more hours for the same mediocre pay? Sounds about right for you." That stung, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was having a bad day, but the bad days kept coming. When I'd watch sports on weekends, she'd make comments like, "Wow, another 3 hours of grown men chasing a ball. Riveting." If I wanted to hang out with my buddies, it was, "Of course you do. God forbid you spend a Saturday actually contributing to this household." The real wake-up call came during a barbecue at her sister's place. I was grilling burgers, just chatting with her brother-in-law about some home improvement project, when she walked over and announced to the group, "Yeah, he talks a big game about fixing things, but I'm still waiting for him to actually finish anything he starts." Everyone laughed awkwardly. Her sister tried to change the subject, but I just stood there holding the spatula, realizing she'd just humiliated me in front of her entire family for absolutely no reason. That night, I tried to talk to her about it. "Hey, that comment earlier hurt my feelings. I've actually finished plenty of projects around the house." She didn't even look away from the TV. "Oh please, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke." But it wasn't just a joke. It was a pattern. And once I started paying attention, I couldn't unsee it. She'd contradict me in front of our friends. If I tell a story, she'd interrupt to correct details that didn't need correcting. When we'd have people over, she'd make little digs about my cooking, my music choices, even the way I loaded the dishwasher. The worst part was how she'd frame it all as harmless teasing. "Can't you take a joke?" became her go-to response whenever I'd call her out. But here's the thing about jokes. They're supposed to be funny, not mean-spirited, not designed to make someone feel small. 2 months ago, I started keeping track. Not in some obsessive way, just mental notes. How many times per week she'd make a disparaging comment. How often she'd dismiss something I said. How frequently she'd choose criticism over conversation. The numbers were depressing. I also started noticing what she didn't do anymore. She stopped asking about my day with any real interest. Stopped laughing at anything I said, even when other people found it funny. Stopped touching me casually. No hand on my shoulder when she walked by. No quick kiss goodbye in the morning. We'd become roommates who barely tolerated each other. Except roommates are usually polite. A month ago, I made a decision. I called a lawyer. Not because I was ready to file for divorce, but because I wanted to understand my options. What would it look like? How would it work? What did I need to know? The consultation was eye-opening. The lawyer asked me to describe my marriage, and when I did, she looked at me with this expression of genuine concern. "How long have you been living like this?" she asked. I guess I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until I said it out loud. I admitted. She handed me some paperwork to review. "Take your time," she said. "But don't take too much time. Life's too short to spend it walking on eggshells in your own home." Walking on eggshells. That phrase hit me hard because that's exactly what I'd been doing. Carefully choosing my words, avoiding certain topics, trying to predict her mood before I opened my mouth. 2 weeks ago, I went back to the lawyer and filed the papers. I wasn't being impulsive or emotional about it. I was being practical. This marriage was over in everything but name, and I was tired of pretending otherwise. I had the papers in my jacket that night because I'd been carrying them around for a week, waiting for the right moment. I never planned for it to happen at game night. But when she announced to our friends that she'd never marry me again, it felt like the universe giving me a sign. Sometimes the right moment isn't the one you plan for. Sometimes it's the one where someone shows you exactly who they are in front of witnesses with complete honesty. And sometimes the best response is to simply agree with them. The silence in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife. 8 people staring at a manila envelope like it contained nuclear secrets. My wife looked like someone had just told her the house was on fire. "You're joking," she said, but her voice cracked on the word joking. "This is some kind of weird joke, right?" I opened the envelope and pulled out the papers, setting them neatly on the coffee table. Official letterhead, legal terminology, signatures required in highlighted yellow. Very real, very final. "Does this look like a joke to you?" I asked. Our friend Kevin cleared his throat. Maybe we should give you guys some privacy." "No," I said, looking around the room. "Everyone can stay." She wanted to be brutally honest in front of everyone, so let's keep being honest. My wife's face was cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Shock, anger, disbelief, panic. "You can't be serious right now. We're at our friend's house. This is completely inappropriate." Inappropriate. I almost laughed. You just announced to everyone here that marrying me was such a terrible decision you'd never do it again. But me agreeing with you is inappropriate." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. For once, she didn't have a comeback ready. Our friend Rachel leaned forward. "Maybe you guys should talk about this at home." "We've been talking at home for months," I said. "Or rather, I've been trying to talk while she's been treating me like an inconvenience." Tonight she finally said what she's been thinking. So here we are. My wife grabbed the papers off the table. "This is insane. You're being completely ridiculous." "Am I?" I looked at her calmly. "Tell me one thing you've said to me in the past 3 months that wasn't a criticism or a complaint. One conversation where you treated me with basic respect." The room was dead quiet. Everyone was looking between us like they were watching a tennis match. My wife's mouth opened and closed a few times, but nothing came out. "That's what I thought," I said. She tried a different approach. "Okay, fine. Maybe I've been a little stressed lately, but this is crazy. You don't end a marriage over some temporary issues." Temporary. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. 3 days ago, you told your sister I was completely useless around the house. Last week, you told our neighbor I have zero ambition. Yesterday, you rolled your eyes when I mentioned wanting to take that photography class. Her face was getting red. "You were listening to my private conversations?" Private conversations that happened in our kitchen while I was 10 feet away? Yeah, I heard them. Kind of hard not to. Kevin's wife whispered something to him. Another couple exchanged glances. The atmosphere was getting uncomfortable, but I wasn't done. "Here's the thing," I continued. "You've made it crystal clear that you don't respect me, don't enjoy my company, and apparently regret marrying me. So why would we stay married?" She looked around the room like she was hoping someone would rescue her. "Because that's what married people do. They work through problems. They don't just give up." "Work through problems?" I genuinely laughed this time. "When exactly were you planning to start working on problems?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you've been the problem." That hit her like a slap. Her face went white, then red again. "How dare you? How dare I what? Agree with you? You literally just said you'd never marry me again. I'm simply making that wish come true." She grabbed my arm. "Stop this. Right now. We're going home, and we're going to talk about this like adults." I gently pulled my arm free. "We're talking about it right now. Like adults. In front of the same people you chose to humiliate me in front of." "I didn't humiliate you." The entire room shifted uncomfortably. Even she seemed to realize how that sounded. "Really?" I asked. "So announcing that you'd never marry me again wasn't meant to be humiliating?" She tried a softer approach. "Look, I was just being funny. You know how I am. I say things without thinking." "Yeah," I said. "I do know how you are. That's exactly why we're here." I stood up and straightened my jacket. "The papers are pretty straightforward. Uncontested divorce, 50-50 split of assets, no alimony. Clean and simple. You've really thought this through," she said, and for the first time, her voice sounded small. Someone had to. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice settling in people's drinks. My wife stared at the papers like they might disappear if she looked hard enough. "So what now?" she asked. "Now you decide if you want to sign them tonight, or take them home and think about it. But either way, this marriage is over. You made that clear when you said you'd never do it again." She looked around the room one more time, probably hoping someone would tell her this was all just a bad dream. Instead, our friend Rachel quietly said, "Maybe we should call it a night." Yeah, maybe we should. The drive home was 15 minutes of pure tension. She kept trying different angles, like she was cycling through a playbook of manipulation tactics. First came denial. "This is all just a big misunderstanding. You're overreacting to everything." Then bargaining. "Okay, maybe I haven't been the best wife lately, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling." When I didn't respond to either approach, she shifted to anger. "You know what? Fine. Maybe I have been critical, but you've been completely checked out of this marriage for months. You never talk to me anymore." I actually laughed at that one. I stopped talking because every time I opened my mouth, you had something negative to say about it. "That's not true. Last Tuesday, I mentioned wanting to repaint the garage. You said, and I quote, 'Great, another project you'll start and never finish.' Wednesday, I suggested we try that new Italian place. Your response was, 'Why?' So you can complain about the prices all night." Thursday, "Okay, stop," she said. I get it. But she didn't stop there. When we got home, she followed me into the bedroom where I started packing a bag. "Where are you going?" "Hotel tonight. I'll get the rest of my stuff this weekend. You don't have to leave. This is your house too." I turned to look at her. "Is it?" Because for the past 3 months, you've made it pretty clear I'm not welcome here. She sat down on the bed, and suddenly the angry facade cracked. I didn't mean what I said tonight. I was just trying to be funny. The thing about humor, I said, folding a shirt, is that it usually contains some truth. And tonight, you told the truth in front of 8 people. But I love you. I stopped packing and looked at her. Really looked at her. When was the last time you showed me that? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I went back to packing. This is ridiculous, she said, anger creeping back into her voice. You're throwing away 6 years of marriage because of a stupid comment. I'm not throwing anything away. You threw it away months ago with every eye roll, every sarcastic comment, every time you chose to tear me down instead of build me up. So that's it. You're just going to walk away? What about for better or worse? I zipped up my bag and turned to face her. What about it? Because the worst part has been pretty one-sided lately. Her phone started buzzing. Probably one of our friends from tonight, wanting to check on us or get the gossip. She ignored it. Everyone's going to think you're crazy, she said, walking out over one comment. Let them think whatever they want. The people who matter will understand that this wasn't about one comment. It was about a pattern of disrespect that finally reached its breaking point. And if I refuse to sign, then we'll do this the hard way, but it'll still get done. She followed me to the front door. You're really leaving? Yeah, I am. And you're not coming back. Not to this. Not to being treated like I'm an inconvenience in my own life. I opened the door, then turned back to her. You know what the sad part is? If you just treated me with basic respect, we probably could have worked through whatever other problems we had. But respect is fundamental. Without it, there's nothing left to save. Please don't do this. You already did it. 3 months ago when you decided I wasn't worth your kindness anymore. Tonight when you announced to our friends that marrying me was a mistake. I'm just catching up to where you've been for a while. I walked to my car, threw my bag in the back, and drove to the Hampton Inn on Route 9. Clean, quiet, and exactly what I needed. My phone started buzzing around 10 o'clock. Text messages from friends who'd been at the game night. Kevin, dude, are you okay? That was intense. Rachel, call me if you need to talk. My buddy Marcus, who wasn't there but apparently heard about it. Heard you made some power moves tonight. Good for you, man. But the most telling message came from Sandra, Kevin's wife. I've been watching how she talks to you for months. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That one hit different. Other people had noticed. I wasn't crazy or overreacting. The pattern had been obvious enough that our friends saw it too. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was her. The papers are still on the kitchen table, she said. I figured they would be. I keep looking at them. And I keep thinking about what you said. About respect. I didn't say anything. Let her work through it. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Maybe I have been terrible to you. Maybe. Okay, yes. I have been. But people change. I can change. Maybe you can. But I'm done waiting to find out. The line went quiet for a long moment. So this is really happening. Yeah, it really is. The next few days were like watching someone go through the 5 stages of grief in fast forward. She called constantly, texted even more. Each message was a different version of the same theme. This was all a huge mistake. Monday morning, I barely slept. We need to talk. Monday afternoon, I've been thinking about everything you said. You're right about some things. Monday night, I called that therapist Rachel recommended. We have an appointment Thursday. I didn't respond to most of them. What was there to say? The conversation was over the moment she signed those papers. Or didn't sign them. Either way, I was done. Tuesday brought a new strategy. She showed up at my office around lunchtime. My assistant buzzed me. Your wife is here to see you. I should have expected it. She walked into my office carrying 2 sandwiches from the deli I liked, and wearing the blue dress she knew was my favorite. I brought lunch, she said, like this was a normal Tuesday. I already ate. She set the sandwiches down anyway and sat across from my desk. You look tired. Hotel beds aren't great for sleep. You could come home. That's not my home anymore. She flinched at that. It doesn't have to be this way. Yes, it does. Because even if you change, even if you become the perfect wife starting tomorrow, I'll never forget how you treated me when you thought I wouldn't do anything about it. So I don't get a second chance. You got hundreds of chances. Every morning for 3 months was a chance to treat me with respect. Every conversation was a chance to choose kindness over criticism. You chose otherwise. She tried tears next. I'm scared. I don't know how to be without you. You've been practicing for months, acting like I wasn't there, dismissing everything I said, rolling your eyes every time I spoke. You'll be fine. That's not fair. Fair. I leaned back in my chair. What's not fair is spending 6 years building a life with someone who decides you're not worth basic human decency. She left without touching the sandwiches. Wednesday brought reinforcements. Her sister called me. She's devastated, she said. This is destroying her. I'm sure it is. Look, I know she hasn't been perfect lately, but don't you think you're being a little extreme? Did she tell you what she said at game night? A pause. She mentioned there was some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. She announced to 8 people that she'd never marry me again. I agreed with her. That's the whole story. She was just being dramatic. You know how she is. Yeah, I do know how she is. That's exactly the problem. But you love her. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Loving someone means expecting them to love you back. Not tolerate you. Not criticize you. Love you. Thursday was her mother. Same conversation, different voice. Friday was our mutual friend Kevin, who took a different approach. Look, man, I get it. She was out of line. But ending a marriage over one comment seems harsh. It wasn't one comment, Kevin. How many times have you heard her make jokes at my expense? How many times have you watched her roll her eyes when I'm talking? How many times have you seen her cut me off or contradict me in front of people? A long pause. Okay, more than once. More than once. It's been every time we've hung out for months. You guys just got to see the highlight reel Wednesday night. But you seemed fine with it. I seemed fine because I was trying to keep the peace. Trying to be the bigger person. Trying to save a marriage that she was actively destroying. And now I'm done trying to save something she clearly doesn't want to be part of. Saturday morning, she was waiting in the hotel parking lot when I came back from getting coffee. The papers are signed, she said through my car window. I turned off the engine. All of them. All of them. She handed me the envelope. But I want you to know I don't agree with this. You don't have to agree. You just have to accept it. I could fight it. Contest the divorce. Make this difficult for you. I looked at her calmly. You could, but that would just prove my point about who you really are. Besides, what would be the point? You already told everyone you'd never marry me again. Her shoulders slumped. I didn't mean it. Maybe not. But you said it. In front of our friends. And that moment of honesty told me everything I needed to know. So what happens now? Now we both move on. You get to be single again, which apparently is what you wanted. And I get to find someone who doesn't think being married to me is a punishment. She stood there for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she just walked back to her car. That afternoon, I signed the papers and dropped them off at my lawyer's office. 3 months later, it was final. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like I could breathe again. 6 months after that game night, I ran into Kevin at the grocery store. He looked genuinely happy to see me, which wasn't always guaranteed after you blow up your marriage in front of mutual friends. Hey man, how are you doing? He asked. Good. Really good, actually. And I meant it. I'd bought a small house across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No criticism about my furniture choices, no eye rolls when I wanted to watch the game, no sarcastic comments about my weekend plans. We miss you at game night, Kevin said. I bet that's been less dramatic. He laughed. Actually, yeah, but also kind of boring. We talked for a few minutes about work, about life, about nothing important. Then he asked the question I'd been expecting. Have you heard from her at all? Not since the divorce was finalized. She's been asking about you. I picked up a box of cereal, checked the price, put it in my cart. Asking what? Just wondering how you're doing. If you're dating anyone. That kind of thing. And what do you tell her? The truth. That you seem happier than you've been in years. That hit me because it was true. I'd started taking that photography class I'd mentioned. Joined a hiking group. Made some new friends who didn't know anything about my failed marriage. People who knew me as I was now. Not as half of a dysfunctional couple. Any regrets? Kevin asked. I thought about it for a moment. Only that I waited so long to do it. Really? No part of you misses being married. I miss being married to someone who actually wanted to be married to me. But that wasn't what I had. Kevin nodded slowly. Rachel said something similar. That you two looked miserable together toward the end. We were miserable. At least I was. She seemed pretty content with the arrangement. Until you left. Until I left. We finished our shopping and said goodbye in the parking lot. As I drove home, I thought about that conversation. About regrets and what-ifs and the path not taken. The truth is, I don't spend much time thinking about her anymore. Not because I'm bitter or angry, but because there's nothing left to think about. That chapter of my life is closed, filed away, finished. Last week, I had dinner with a woman I met at the photography class. She laughed at my jokes, asked questions about my work, and when I told a story about my weekend hiking trip, she listened without rolling her eyes or making sarcastic comments. Basic human decency. It's amazing how good it feels when you've been without it for so long. I've learned some things about myself over the past year. I learned that I'd rather be alone than disrespected. I learned that love without respect isn't actually love at all. And I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who don't appreciate what you bring to their life. That game night feels like it happened to someone else now. That guy who sat there taking criticism and sarcasm and outright disrespect. I barely recognize him. He thought that's what marriage was supposed to look like. He thought that's what he deserved. He was wrong on both counts. The woman I'm dating now asked me recently what happened with my ex-wife. I gave her the short version. We grew apart, wanted different things. It didn't work out. Do you think you'll ever get married again? She asked. I thought about that game night question. Would you marry your spouse again? Yeah, I said, but only to someone who would answer that question with absolutely. She smiled. That seems reasonable. It does, doesn't it? Reasonable to expect that the person you marry actually wants to be married to you. Reasonable to expect respect and kindness and basic human decency. Reasonable to expect that after 6 years together, your spouse wouldn't announce to a room full of friends that marrying you was such a mistake they'd never do it again. I sleep well these days. I wake up in a house where nobody criticizes my coffee. Nobody rolls their eyes at my conversation. Nobody treats me like an inconvenience they have to tolerate. Sometimes I think about that envelope of divorce papers. How I carried them around for a week, waiting for the right moment. How the right moment ended up being the moment she told our friends she'd never marry me again. The universe has a sense of humor sometimes. Or maybe it's just that truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. Either way, I'm grateful it happened. Because now I know what I won't accept in a relationship. And more importantly, I know what I will. These days, when someone asks me if I have any regrets about my divorce, I tell them the truth. My only regret is that it took her saying she'd never marry me again for me to realize I didn't want to be married to her either. The difference is, I was smart enough to do something about it.